We're going to be looking at the most hated fighters in each UFC division. These are the fighters that, if Dana White were to stack a card full of them, it'd probably do like 500 pay-per-view buys. No one really likes to see these guys fight. They're either boring or they have bad personalities. At flyweight, I got Amir Albazi. The main reason people don't like him is because he had an absolute robbery over Kaikar France, which he won't even admit that it was a robbery. And then beyond that, he's just a boring fighter. His average fight time's over 14 minutes long. He shoots on average over 20 takedowns a fight. And he's just a smudge fighter. Sometimes he'll get a finish later in the fight, but usually he's just smudging you, holding you somewhere. He's just not fan friendly at all. If you're trying to put your boy onto the UFC, this is one of the last people you want to show him because he probably will never watch again. But yeah, for flyweight, I got to go with Amir Albazi. I don't think anyone really likes him. Bantamweight, this one's obvious. Might be the most hated person in the UFC. I gotta go with Mario Bautista. Obviously, the main reason people hate him is he just had an absolute robbery over Jose Aldo. Uh, just held him against the cage all fight. Didn't do any significant damage. I think Aldo actually won the fight. Just he did more damage. Um, and then when he did get separated for inactivity, he shot right back in to stall even more. So a lot of people really don't like him for that, myself included. And then on top of that, he just got a bit of a loudmouth. He tried to press Henry Cejudo on why Henry Cejudo was ducking him, this, that, and the third. But Henry Cejudo absolutely 10-8'd him. He pretty much told Batista what we all think. He just said he's boring, and he hasn't done anything in the sport to earn a matchup like Cejudo. But honestly, after Cejudo's most recent loss, this isn't the worst fight to make. Batista versus Cejudo, they got a bit of beef going on. They could squash that real quick, and I think it'd be a pretty easy win for Henry. So yeah, honestly, that's not a bad fight to make. But yeah, I don't think even before the Auto fight, I don't think anyone could find an actual Mario Bautista fan. I didn't know if they existed, and after the Auto fight, they definitely don't exist unless someone like unironically, there's no such thing as a Mario Bautista fan at this current moment in time. No one likes him, and yeah, you absolutely do not want to show him to your friend if you're trying to get him into the sport. Because, like I said with Amir Albazi, he is not going to be watching again. Next, we got Movsar Evloev. Not a single finish in the UFC. He's coming off of 2 robbery wins. I'd say the majority of people do think he beat Sterling, but personally, I think Sterling won that. But either way, he definitely did not beat Allen. He kind of gamed the system, made it seem like he was a grounded opponent when Allen hit him with all those knees. They washed it back. They're completely legal, and Movsar just got to recover from what would likely be a finish. Allen landed like 3 knees to his head and had him on the cage. But yeah, Movsar was gaming the system there. Overall, he's just a boring grappler. Yeah, I mean, look at his finishes. Doesn't really offer any threats. Um, Now, to be fair, I do think he's more deserving of a title shot over Diego Lopez. But I see why the UFC didn't give it to him just because how boring he is. Personally, I really wish they would have given the nod to Sterling. Um, and Sterling could be fighting Volk, which would have been a legendary fight. But now we got Diego Lopez. And it is what it is. It'll still be a good fight. But yeah, no one likes Movsar. He's just, like I said over and over, he's boring. Probably one of the most boring in the UFC. Well, I don't know though. To be honest, his fights aren't necessarily boring. Like the Allen fight and Sterling fights weren't really boring. But just in general, Movsar has no finishing threat. And he's like a Dagestani, so that's another reason people don't like him. At lightweight, I absolutely do not understand this one. It's Michael Chandler. Personally, I love Michael Chandler. He's one of the few fighters that'll risk his chance of winning to entertain the fans. You know, he's won rounds amongst the most elite fighters: Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira. He's won rounds against all those guys despite losing. But yeah, people don't like him. One of the reasons is he sat out and waited for McGregor forever. I can see why it's annoying. People want to see activity. People want to see him fight. But he's waiting on this McGregor fight that most assumed would never happen, which they're right. But he did end up getting that fight booked. McGregor pulled out because of pinky toe. He wasn't fully locked in. But can you actually blame him for wanting the McGregor fight? In this sport, it's either money fights or you're fighting to become the champion. He just had the opportunity to set his family up for a lifetime, and he took it. So I mean, I don't really think you can blame him for that. It's mildly annoying that he's sitting out all that time. It even comes off as desperate. Always calling out McGregor every event he goes to. He gets the mic, does this little McGregor thing, WWE call out. But yeah, that definitely comes off as desperate. But like I said, he's just trying to set up his family, which you can't blame him for that. And then, he's also 2-5 in the UFC. Some people are saying he doesn't deserve to be ranked what he is, top 10. He was top 5 for the longest time. Um, his only wins are over a washed Tony Ferguson, which he lost the first round, arguably. And then he got a win over Dan Hooker, which is aging amazingly. But at that point in time, Dan Hooker was on a bit of a downwards trajectory in his career. But he's at a bit of a resurgence now that he dyed his hair blonde. But that's beyond the point. People are just saying, he's 2-5. They're thinking he should be cut if he loses another fight. I don't think UFC should cut him though. He's just extremely entertaining. This is a guy that you want to show your friends to. If he's fighting, you want to get everyone gathered up around the TV because you know it's going to be an absolute war. Oliveira is actually the one that made their fight a little more boring, just holding Michael Chandler down. Lastly, I will say he's a pretty dirty fighter. Fish hooking Dustin Poirier, back of the head shots on Oliveira, back of the head shots on Poirier. He eye poked Gaethje and then went for a hard right hand after. Not the cleanest fighter. I'll definitely agree with that. But he has the chance to make himself not the most hated fighter if he can beat Paddy Pimblett, who a lot of fans don't like as of now, but he got some more respect after his Bobby Green and Tony Ferguson wins. If Michael Chandler can beat him, he'll probably get some of his likability back. And next we got Bilal Muhammad. This one's not a surprise to anyone. People liked him for a very short period of time after he beat Edwards because Edwards was seen as a curse to the division. He didn't fight a lot, and his fights were boring. But the reality is, Bilal Muhammad's an even worse version of Edwards. He fights even less than Edwards does, and he's more boring. Um, and then people like to say he dominated Edwards. It was 3-2. Definitely not a dominant performance. And then he's got the fight with JDM coming up, which I think he'll win that just because you saw JDM against Burns. He had a really hard time with the grappling, and Bilal's an even better wrestler with better control. So I think we'll see Bilal's going to stick around for 2 or 3 more fights until like a Shavkat or Ian Gary or someone can get to him. Also, he doesn't want to fight Islam Makhachev. They trained like 2, 3 times, and he's very adamant about not fighting him. Makhachev seems to not care as much, but dude, like Bilal's saying Makhachev should go up to 85 and that he'd beat Duplessis. It almost seems like he's scared of Makhachev, and he doesn't want to give him that shot. Bilal himself said he wants to go up to 85. He's always talking trash on Strickland Duplessis, which is fine, but he's never gonna fight him, and let alone the UFC ain't gonna let him go up because he's boring. He's not a draw. This guy would sell like 2 pay-per-views, so he's not very well liked, and a lot of people cannot wait to see him get out of the limelight and lose his belt. For middleweight, I had to go with Bo Nickel. One of his first draws was this is talking. Since the beginning, he's been saying he could beat Chimaev, all this other stuff, how he'd be the champion, easy money, which whatever, you gotta have confidence in yourself. But then what also upset UFC fans was that he got a main card spot on UFC 300 over champions like Holly Holm. And well, I don't think anyone was mad about that. But Aljamain Sterling, Cody Garbrandt, Figueiredo, I'm sure I'm missing some, but he got a main card spot over all those guys just to have like what was kind of stinker performance, like not very entertaining, which I think if you watch it back, it's not as bad as people were making it out to be. Second round finish, first round, like some good, interesting ground and pound grappling exchanges. And even some antics, some funny moments, like when Brunage had the highlight of his career and was able to shuck off Nickel from one of his shots. And then he followed that up with a win over Paul Craig, which he didn't even attempt to shoot in. And it was just a very boring stand up fight. But personally, Bo Nickel's one of my favorite fighters. I don't know how it is for you guys, but when I watch my favorite fighter, it could be a 5 round, most boring decision ever, and I'd still enjoy it. So I didn't really mind either of those fights. I just like to see him in there. That could be another thing too. He's pretty inactive, which, like I said, UFC fans don't like, and some even say he doesn't deserve his middleweight ranking. But I don't know who else you'd put there. I'm sure you guys will be able to come up with someone. I think he is elite, and we'll have to see how his wrestling really pans out against the elite competition. Now, I don't think his takedowns are going to be like as good as Chimaev's, but scrambling wise, he's going to be hard to out scramble. just like he was in his wrestling career. Yeah, Bo Nickel, a lot of fans just don't like him at middleweight, and I couldn't think of another middleweight that fans dislike more. For light heavyweight, we got Magomed Ankalaev, Big Ank. I really don't know why people don't like him. Maybe it's because he's a Dagestani, but I just know people don't like him. They think he's boring. I don't think he's too boring. Maybe earlier in his career, but he's more so of a striker than a grappler in all reality. And he's had a good amount of knockouts. You can see there 6 finishes in the first round. His only loss is to Paul Craig, like last 10 seconds, fluky submission, and then he has the draw to Jan Blachowicz. I don't think he's that boring of a fighter or bad of a fighter. I think people just don't like him because he's Dagestani. If you guys can think of a reason people don't like him, or you don't like him yourself, let me know in the comments. But I don't know why people don't like him, to be honest, other than where he's from. And then for heavyweight, this one's kind of no-brainer. I had to go with John Jones. Multiple reasons people don't like him. I'll start with the first one. He's ducking the current interim champion in Tom Aspinall. You know, I get that the Stipe fight was always the plan, and when John got hurt, they wanted to still keep that fight on, which it's a little annoying, but fair enough. But my one caveat with that was if he was going to fight Stipe, which he did, they rescheduled it for 2024, a year later from the original date. If he was going to fight Miocic, he either had to retire after the fight or agree to the Tom Aspinall fight. But now he just has us waiting around. We have no clue what's going to happen. Is he going to fight Aspinall or not? Dana seems pretty adamant that he is going to fight Aspinall, but we've seen Dana adamant about a lot of things that have never happened, so I don't really know how much weight I should give his word. Everyone wants to see this fight, and Jones is the only one that's preventing it. Also, he popped for PEDs, which I think a lot more UFC fighters are on PEDs than people realize. I would not be surprised if 70, 80, 90% of the UFC roster was on some sort of microdose or cycle of PEDs. But either way, John Jones popped, and that takes him out of the GOAT discussion for many. But like I said, I think a lot more people are on PEDs than some realize, so I don't take him out of my GOAT discussion, but everyone's got their own criteria. And lastly, obviously he's at his out of cage troubles. To not get my video taken down, I'll just say his Vegas activities, there's just no defending that. I mean, everything he did there was pretty scummy. But personally, John's one of my favorite fighters. I mean, he's the GOAT, and when he's fighting, everyone's excited. Whether you love him or hate him, everyone's tuned into a John Jones fight. But yeah, he's definitely very hated, regardless of how hyped up his fights are. Those were my picks for the most hated UFC fighters in each division. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. I respond to all the comments. And make sure you like and subscribe. And I'll see you soon.